The year is drifting toward the deep heart of midwinter in the rolling, mist-shrouded hills of ancient Britain. Outside the thick, lime-washed walls of the roundhouse, the world has surrendered to a profound and heavy silence. It is a silence so absolute that it feels like a physical presence, a soft blanket of white velvet that has descended over the forests of oak and ash, pressing the breath out of the valley. The sky is a flat, unmoving expanse of pale pewter, holding within its vast belly the promise of more snow, though for now the air is perfectly still. There is no wind to rattle the skeletal branches of the hawthorn hedges, no cry of a distant hawk to pierce the gloom. There is only the quiet, the cold, and the slow, rhythmic pulse of time as it moves through the shortest days of the year. Inside the roundhouse, the atmosphere is a sharp contrast to the biting frost that claws at the exterior. Here, the air is thick with the scent of dried herbs, seasoned timber, and the lingering, comforting aroma of wood smoke that has permeated every fiber of the conical thatched roof. The darkness is not frightening. It is a cradle, a soft enclosure that draws the world inward until the only reality that exists is the 3 meters surrounding the central hearth. The floor, composed of hard-packed earth and clay, feels solid and cool beneath the thick layers of woven wool rugs and cured animal hides. Every footstep is muffled, every movement slowed by the sheer density of the warmth that clings to the skin like a physical embrace. At the very center of this circular world lies the hearth. It is a wide, shallow pit lined with large, smooth river stones, stones that were gathered during the warmth of the previous summer, polished by the flow of the stream until they were perfectly rounded. Now those stones are saturated with heat. They glow with a dull, subterranean red, radiating a steady, unwavering warmth that travels upward through the soles of the feet and into the marrow of the bones. On these stones rests the lifeblood of the home, the fire. It is not a roaring blaze of chaotic sparks and leaping flames, but a disciplined, ancient fire, a slow-burning mound of oak logs and peat that has been carefully tended since the sun first dipped below the horizon weeks ago. To look at the fire is to see the passage of time reflected in the slow disintegration of the wood. A thick log of seasoned oak lies across the embers, its bark charred into a delicate geometric pattern of blackened scales. Occasionally, a tiny fissure will open in the wood, revealing a glowing interior of brilliant orange that pulses like a heartbeat. From this fissure, a single, thin ribbon of smoke rises, twisting and turning in a lazy, hypnotic dance as it seeks the small opening at the peak of the thatch. The smoke is pale, almost translucent, carrying with it the scent of the forest, a deep, earthy perfume of resin and ancient earth. Beside the hearth, the tools of the morning are laid out with a precision that speaks of 1,000 years of ritual. There is a heavy iron cauldron, its surface pitted and dark from decades of use over the flames. It sits on a tripod of forged iron, its legs sinking slightly into the soft earth at the edge of the hearth. Beside it stands a large ceramic jar, its clay body a deep, rustic red, decorated with simple, swirling patterns etched by a finger before it was fired. Inside this jar is the water, drawn from the spring deep in the woods where the ice has not yet reached the moving depths. The water is cold, so cold that it leaves a fine mist of condensation on the outer surface of the jar, creating tiny droplets that slowly merge and trickle down the side, leaving dark, damp trails against the red clay. There is a profound sense of peace in the preparation. There is no hurry. The sun will not show its face for many hours, and even then it will be a mere ghost behind the clouds. The task at hand is the only task that matters, the preparation of the morning meal, the slow boiling of the porridge. First, the water must be measured. The ladle is made of polished horn, smooth and translucent, with a handle that fits perfectly into the palm of the hand. As it dips into the ceramic jar, there is a soft, melodic plink, the sound of liquid being displaced. The water is poured into the iron cauldron, falling in a steady, crystalline stream that shatters the silence of the room. Splash, gurgle, settle. The sound is rhythmic, a liquid heartbeat that echoes against the curved walls. 1 ladle, 2 ladles, 3. The iron pot begins to fill, the water swirling around the bottom, picking up the faint, metallic scent of the iron. Next comes the grain. In a large, shallow basket woven from split willow, the oats wait. These are not the flat, processed flakes of the modern world, but whole groats, heavy and golden, still carrying the essence of the summer fields. Each grain is a tiny, hard nugget of life, encased in a thin, papery husk. When a handful is lifted, they rustle like dry leaves in a gentle breeze, a soft, abrasive sound that is curiously satisfying to the ears. The weight of the grain in the hand is significant, a solid, grainy mass that shifts and settles between the fingers. Before the oats can meet the water, they must be broken. For this, there is the quern stone. It sits in the corner, a massive, silent sentinel of gray granite. It consists of 2 parts, a flat, stationary base and a heavy, circular upper stone with a wooden handle fixed into its side. The process of grinding is the very definition of monotony, a repetitive motion that lulls the mind into a state of semi-consciousness. A handful of oats is poured into the small hole at the center of the upper stone. Then the handle is grasped. The wood is smooth, worn down by generations of hands until it feels almost like silk. With a slow, steady push, the stone begins to turn. Grrrrrrrind, grrrrrrrind, grrrrrrrind. The sound is deep and guttural, a vibration that can be felt in the floorboards and in the chest. It is the sound of stone meeting stone, with the grain caught in the middle, being slowly crushed into a coarse, fragrant meal. The resistance of the stone is constant. It requires a steady application of strength, a rhythmic swaying of the body that mimics the movement of the tides. With every revolution, the oats are flattened and torn, their golden interiors exposed to the air. A fine dust begins to rise, a pale, sweet-smelling cloud of oat flour that settles on the hands and the sleeves of the wool tunic. It is soft as down, a delicate coating that contrasts with the rough, heavy work of the grinding. As the stone turns, the crushed grain begins to spill out from the edges, falling onto a clean linen cloth spread out beneath the quern. It gathers in a neat, pale mound, growing slowly with every circle of the stone. The movement is hypnotic, round and round. The left hand holds the basket, the right hand guides the stone. The eyes track the circular path of the handle, watching as it passes the same point over and over again. The shadows on the wall, cast by the flickering hearth, mimic the movement, stretching and shrinking in a silent, synchronized dance. The smell of the freshly ground oats begins to fill the air. It is a wholesome, grounding scent, nutty, sweet, and redolent of dry earth and sunshine. It mingles with the wood smoke and the dampness of the thawing frost near the door, creating a sensory tapestry that defines the interior of the roundhouse. This is the scent of survival, the scent of comfort against the encroaching winter. After a long time, perhaps 20 minutes, perhaps an hour, time has little meaning here. The grinding is complete. The quernstone comes to a final, heavy halt. The silence that follows is even deeper than before, broken only by the faint, distant crackle of the oak log in the hearth. The ground oats are gathered carefully, the linen cloth lifted by its corners so that not a single grain is lost. They are poured into a wooden bowl where they sit in a coarse, textured pile, waiting for the fire. The iron cauldron is now hanging over the heat. The water inside has begun to lose its stillness. Tiny bubbles, no larger than a pinhead, have started to form on the bottom and sides of the pot, clinging to the iron like translucent pearls. The heat from the hearth is being absorbed by the metal, transferred to the liquid, raising its temperature by slow, invisible degrees. There is no steam yet, only a faint shimmering in the air above the cauldron, a distortion of the light that suggests the energy building within. The ground oats are added to the water. They do not sink immediately. Instead, they float on the surface in a thick golden raft. With a long wooden stirring spoon, carved from a single piece of birch and polished until it shines, the grain is gently submerged. The spoon moves in a slow, clockwise direction, following the path of the sun. The water turns cloudy as the starches begin to release, transforming the clear liquid into a pale, milky broth. The sound of the stirring is a soft, wet sloshing. Shhh-wish, shhh-wish. It is a peaceful sound, the sound of something becoming. The spoon scrapes occasionally against the side of the iron pot, a dull, muffled clink that punctuates the rhythmic movement. As the mixture begins to heat, the oats swell, absorbing the water and expanding until the texture of the liquid thickens. The fire is adjusted. A small, glowing ember is pushed closer to the center of the pot with a pair of iron tongs. The goal is not a rolling boil, but a slow fire, a temperature that allows the oats to soften and release their creamy essence without burning. This is the most patient part of the morning. The porridge cannot be rushed. It must simmer, it must breathe, it must absorb the heat of the oak and the spirit of the hearth. Outside, the first hint of gray light begins to filter through the heavy clouds, illuminating the snow-covered landscape in a cold, ethereal glow. But inside, the world remains golden and warm. The steam has finally begun to rise from the cauldron, a thick white plume that carries the scent of boiling grain throughout the roundhouse. It curls around the iron handle of the pot, drifting upward toward the darkness of the thatch. The porridge is now at a gentle simmer. A single bubble rises to the surface, expanding slowly until it pops with a soft blup. Then another, and another. Each one is a small release of heat and aroma. The mixture is becoming dense and rich, a bubbling landscape of cream and gold that moves with the slow, deliberate pace of the earth itself. The stirring continues, a mindless, meditative action that keeps the porridge from sticking, ensuring that every grain is cooked to perfection in the embrace of the slow, ancient fire. The morning continues to unfold with the slow, deliberate grace of a drifting cloud. Inside the roundhouse, The passage of time is measured not by the ticking of a clock, but by the gradual thickening of the porridge and the steady consumption of the oak logs by the hearth. The iron cauldron, suspended by its heavy chain from the blackened tripod, has become the focal point of all existence. It is a world unto itself, a dark, metallic vessel containing a landscape of golden grain and shimmering water that is slowly, almost imperceptibly, transforming into the day's first nourishment. The wooden stirring spoon remains in the hand, its handle warm from the proximity of the fire. The wood is birch, harvested from a tree that once stood near the edge of the clearing, and it has been smoothed by years of use until the grain is visible only as faint, ghostly lines beneath a surface as polished as river stone. The hand moves in a steady, rhythmic circle, round and round. The resistance of the porridge is growing. At first, the spoon moved through the water with ease, a light swish that offered no pushback. But now, as the starches swell and burst, the liquid has gained a heavy, velvety texture. It clings to the wood, creating a slight drag that requires a fraction more effort with every rotation. Swish-clunk, swish-clunk. The spoon occasionally meets the side of the iron pot with a dull, resonant sound. It is a low-frequency vibration that travels up the wooden handle and into the palm, a reminder of the solid, unyielding nature of the iron. The cauldron itself is a masterpiece of ancient smithing, its surface a map of hammer marks and cooling lines from the day it was forged. It has seen countless winters like this one, absorbed the heat of 1,000 fires, and it holds that heat with a stubborn, heavy persistence. The steam rising from the pot has become thicker now, a translucent white veil that dances in the draft from the doorway. It carries the primary scent of the room, the deep, nutty aroma of the oats, now fully hydrated and releasing their sweet, earthy essence. If one leans close, the steam feels like a warm, damp kiss against the skin, softening the dry chill that lingers at the edges of the roundhouse. It smells of sustenance, of the harvest that was gathered under a hot August sun, now being brought to life once more in the dead of winter. It is a smell that promises safety and the continuation of the day. At the edge of the hearth, the fire requires a small adjustment. It is a task performed with the same slow, meditative care as the stirring. From the stack of firewood kept near the interior wall, a single piece of seasoned ash is selected. The wood is bone dry, its bark silver gray and brittle, covered in a fine lace of dried moss that crumbles at the slightest touch. The log is heavy for its size, a dense cylinder of stored sunlight. Using the iron tongs, blackened, heavy, and slightly soot-stained, a space is cleared among the glowing red embers. The movement is precise. The tongs click softly as they grip a piece of charcoal, moving it to the side to reveal the white-hot heart of the fire. When the ash log is placed onto the heat, there is a momentary silence as the fire considers the new offering. Then, a tiny, high-pitched whistle begins, the sound of the last microscopic trace of moisture escaping from the end of the grain. It is a lonely, musical sound, like a distant flute played in a forest of ice. Slowly, the edges of the ash log begin to darken. The silver bark curls back, glowing bright orange before turning to a delicate, papery gray ash. A small flame, pale blue at its base and clear yellow at its tip, licks upward, wrapping itself around the wood. It does not roar, it purrs. It is a contented fire, one that understands the necessity of the slow simmer. The heat increases by a fraction of a degree, radiating outward and striking the side of the cauldron, ensuring the porridge stays at that perfect, pulsating simmer. The stirring continues, round and round. The mind begins to drift, caught in the loop of the movement. One's gaze might fall upon the walls of the roundhouse, where the woven wattle and daub are visible in the flickering firelight. The lime wash reflects the golden glow, creating a soft, amber environment that feels ancient and secure. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the rafters, thyme, yarrow, and meadowsweet, their forms now mere shadows in the dim light, but their scents still faintly present, adding a herbal top note to the heavy smell of the oats and wood smoke. In the corner, a large, flat stone serves as a workspace. On it sits a small, carved wooden bowl containing a precious commodity, sea salt. The salt was brought from the distant coast during the autumn trading, carried in a leather pouch to keep it dry. It is coarse and gray, with large, jagged crystals that catch the light like tiny diamonds. A small pinch is taken between the thumb and forefinger. The texture is gritty, sharp, and cold. As the salt is sprinkled into the cauldron, the crystals vanish instantly into the thick, bubbling surface of the porridge. They do not change the appearance of the meal, but they transform its soul, heightening the natural sweetness of the oats and grounding the flavor. A second pinch follows, falling in a slow, sparkling cascade. The hand then returns to the spoon, stirring the salt into the depths of the mixture, ensuring it is evenly distributed through every heavy, golden fold of the grain. The porridge is now entering its most hypnotic state. The surface is a landscape of slow-motion activity. A large bubble forms near the center, rising slowly like a dome of molten gold. It stretches the surface of the porridge thin until it is a translucent film. Then blup, it bursts, releasing a small puff of concentrated steam. The void it leaves is immediately filled by the surrounding mixture, which flows inward with a thick, viscous grace. This happens over and over in different spots across the surface of the pot. Blup, blup, blup. It is a rhythmic, percussive sound, the heartbeat of the kitchen. The thickness is almost perfect now. When the spoon is lifted, the porridge does not run off. It hangs for a moment before falling in a heavy, cohesive ribbon that stacks upon itself in the pot before slowly sinking back into the mass. The color has shifted from the pale white of the raw oats to a rich, creamy tan, the color of wet sand under a setting sun. The individual grains have lost their hard edges, merging into a singular, comforting texture that promises to be smooth on the tongue and warming in the belly. The world outside remains frozen and distant. Through the small, high window slit, covered with a piece of translucent, oiled animal bladder to keep out the wind, one can see only the shift from dark gray to a slightly lighter shade of pearl. The snow continues to fall, adding layer upon layer to the silence of the hills, but inside the rhythm is steady. The hand continues its circular journey. The fire continues its slow consumption of the ash log. The steam continues its climb toward the thatch. There is a deep sense of satisfaction in this monotony. It is a reminder that even in the harshest winter, there is a process that leads to warmth. There is a series of small, manageable tasks that, when performed with patience and care, create a sanctuary. The scraping of the spoon, the crackle of the wood, the bubbling of the pot, these are the sounds of a life well tended. They are the sounds of a world that is small, safe, and entirely contained within these circular walls. The temperature in the roundhouse has stabilized. The heat from the hearth has pushed back the chill until only the very edges of the room near the floor feel the touch of the frost. The air is heavy and still, smelling of salt and grain and ancient trees. The stirring becomes slower now, almost effortless, as the porridge reaches its final consistency. It is a thick, bubbling sea of cream, moving with the weight of the earth itself, waiting for the moment when the fire has done its work, and the meal is ready to be shared in the quiet, gray light of the British midwinter. The log in the fire has settled now, its center a glowing cavern of heat. A layer of white ash has begun to form on its surface, insulating the fire and ensuring it lasts for hours to come. The iron cauldron, too, seems to have settled into its role, its dark surface gleaming with the reflection of the flames. Everything is in its place. Everything is as it should be. The slow fire continues to burn, the porridge continues to bubble, and the morning remains a vast, unhurried expanse of peace and warmth. As the minutes stretch into an hour, the mind finds rest in the repetition. The eyes track the steam as it curls around the tripod legs. The ears tune in to the soft, wet sound of the stirring. The body feels the solid weight of the spoon and the radiating heat of the hearth. There is no need for words, no need for action beyond this. The world is reduced to the simmer, the steam, and the slow, inevitable transformation of grain into gold. The steam is now so thick that it occasionally obscures the surface of the pot, creating a private world within the cauldron. When the spoon breaks through the mist, it reveals the rich, undulating surface of the porridge, which has become glossy and smooth. The starches have fully gelatinized, creating a texture that is both light and incredibly dense. It is the peak of the process, the moment where the raw elements of earth and water have been fully wetted by the fire. Still, there is no rush. The fire is low, the heat is steady, and the porridge can sit like this for a long time, becoming more flavorful with every passing minute of the slow boil. The hand continues to move, a guardian of the hearth, ensuring that the peace of the morning remains undisturbed. The rhythmic swish of the spoon remains the only sound in the room, a soft, comforting companion to the silence of the snow outside. The air in the roundhouse is now completely saturated with the scent of the meal. It is a thick, nourishing smell that feels as though it could sustain a person even before they take a single bite. It is the scent of home, of history, and of the quiet endurance of the people who have lived in these hills for generations. It is a smell that says the winter can be survived, one slow fire at a time. The stirring becomes even more languid. The arm feels heavy, but in a pleasant, relaxed way, as if the rhythm of the spoon has seeped into the muscles and bones. The firelight flickers, casting long, slow-moving shadows across the floor, mimicking the circular motion of the stirring. The world is a loop of warmth and shadow, a cycle of steam and grain, a slow, beautiful boredom that lulls the spirit into a state of profound calm. In the silence, the sound of the bubbling porridge seems to grow louder, filling the space with its friendly domestic chatter. Blup, blup, blup. It is the sound of time passing in the most peaceful way possible. It is the sound of the ancient world waking up, not with a shout but with a gentle, warming sigh. The fire glows, the steam rises, and the porridge continues to boil on the slow, steady fire of the midwinter hearth. The slow, rhythmic pulse of the morning continues to dictate the pace of life within the thick, sheltering walls of the roundhouse. The iron cauldron, now heavy with the weight of the fully hydrated oats, remains suspended over the gentle warmth of the hearth. The porridge has reached a state of deep, viscous maturity, its surface a thick, bubbling expanse of creamy gold. Each bubble that rises from the dark depths of the pot takes its time, swelling slowly against the resistance of the dense grain before finally releasing a soft, wet thwop that echoes faintly against the curved, lime-washed walls. The sound is steady, a low-frequency heartbeat that anchors the room in a state of absolute tranquility. In the corner of the dwelling, tucked away in the cool shadows where the heat of the fire only reaches as a faint, lingering caress, sits a small, squat ceramic jar. It is a humble object, fashioned from the same dark, iron-rich clay as the water vessel, but its surface is smoother, polished by the constant handling of many winters. The lid is a simple disc of heavy oak, carved with a small notch to allow a wooden dipper to rest within. This jar holds the honey, the distilled essence of the summer meadows, gathered by the bees from the wild thyme, heather, and clover that once carpeted the hills in shades of purple and white. The act of reaching for the honey is a slow, deliberate movement. The hand moves through the warm, smoke-scented air, the fingers brushing against the coarse, comforting weave of the wool tunic. The jar is cool to the touch, its ceramic body holding the deep chill of the earth from which it was born. As the oak lid is lifted, there is a soft, friction-filled sound, a dry, wooden rasp that marks the transition from the savory scent of the oats to the concentrated sweetness of the hive. Inside, the honey is dark and thick, a liquid amber that has partially crystallized in the cold of the storage corner. It catches the flickering light of the hearth, glowing with an inner radiance that seems to hold the very memory of the sun. The wooden dipper, carved from a slender branch of hazel, is submerged into the golden depths. The resistance is significant. The honey is slow to yield, clinging to the wood with a stubborn, syrupy grip. As the dipper is rotated, the honey wraps itself around the carved notches of the hazel head, building up into a heavy, glistening bulb of sweetness. The dipper is lifted with a slow, steady hand. A single, thin thread of honey remains connected to the jar, stretching thinner and thinner until it is nothing more than a golden gossamer strand, vibrating slightly in the draft before finally snapping and retreating back into the jar. The bulb of honey on the dipper is carried across the short distance to the cauldron. It hangs over the bubbling porridge for a moment, the heat of the steam beginning to soften its crystalline structure. Then, with a gentle tilt of the wrist, the honey begins to flow. It does not drop all at once. It descends in a slow, undulating ribbon, coiling upon the surface of the porridge like a golden serpent. It sinks slightly into the creamy tan of the oats, creating a dark, translucent pool that contrasts beautifully with the opaque grain. The scent changes instantly. The nutty aroma of the boiling oats is now joined by the floral, slightly medicinal tang of the honey, a smell of summer sun and buzzing wings, brought into the frozen heart of winter. The stirring spoon, that faithful companion of the morning, is brought back into play. The movement is once again circular, but now it carries a new purpose: the integration of the honey. The golden coils are broken, stretched out into thin, swirling patterns that marble the surface of the porridge. Round and round the spoon goes, the wood making that familiar, muffled clish-clash against the iron sides of the pot. The honey is folded deep into the mixture, its sweetness dispersing until the entire mass of porridge takes on a slightly darker, richer hue. As the honey integrates, the texture of the porridge changes once more. It becomes glossier, the surface catching the firelight with a new, silken sheen. The starches and the sugars have wedded, creating a mixture that is incredibly dense and satisfyingly heavy. The effort required to turn the spoon has increased by a small but noticeable margin, a physical reminder of the nourishment being prepared. Next to the hearth sits another vessel, this one a small, wide-mouthed jug of pale, unglazed stoneware. It contains the cream, skimmed from the top of the milk that was brought in before the first snow began to fall. The cream is thick, almost yellow in color, carrying the richness of the late-season grass. It has been kept near the fire, just close enough to take off the chill but not so close as to turn. When the jug is lifted, the cream moves with a heavy, sluggish grace, coating the sides of the stoneware in a thick, opaque film. The cream is poured into the cauldron in a single, steady stream. It hits the center of the porridge with a soft, muffled splash, spreading outward in a pale, expanding circle. For a few moments, the movement in the pot ceases, the heat of the porridge momentarily suppressed by the cool weight of the cream. Then the simmer returns. A bubble of cream-infused porridge rises to the surface and bursts, releasing a cloud of steam that is now richer, heavier, and infinitely more comforting than before. The stirring resumes, a slow, languid motion that blends the yellow cream into the tan porridge. The two colors swirl together, creating a beautiful, chaotic tapestry of shades before finally merging into a uniform, buttery creaminess. The porridge is now at its peak, a thick, bubbling sea of heat and nourishment, smelling of grain, honey, wood smoke, and the deep, earthy richness of the farm. The fire, sensing the transition, has settled into a state of glowing perfection. The ash log has been reduced to a skeletal form, its surface covered in a thick layer of fine white powder that pulses with a hidden, inner heat. The temperature in the center of the roundhouse is constant, a warm, dry envelope that protects against the damp cold that lingers near the low doorway. The shadows on the walls have grown longer as the gray light outside remains dim, the clouds refusing to break. The mind, lulled by the repetition of the stirring and the steady, rhythmic sounds of the hearth, begins to wander upward. Above the cauldron, the rafters of the roundhouse are visible, a complex web of oak beams and hazel wattles, all blackened by decades of smoke. Each beam is thick and solid, carrying the weight of the massive thatch roof that sits above them like a protective cap. The smoke from the fire rises in a lazy, unhurried spiral, weaving through the beams before finding its way out through the peak of the roof. It is a slow, silent exodus, a constant breath that keeps the air within the dwelling fresh, despite the lack of windows. Hanging from these beams are the various provisions of the winter. Bundles of dried leeks, their skins papery and white, hang alongside strings of dried apples that have shriveled into tough, brown discs of concentrated sweetness. There are bags of hazelnuts, their shells clicking softly against one another whenever a draft catches them. These objects are the silent witnesses to the season, a visual tally of the year's labor, now being slowly consumed as the world outside sleeps beneath the snow. One's attention returns to the cauldron. The porridge has thickened to the point where the spoon can almost stand on its own in the center of the pot. It is a dense, solid mass of heat. The bubbling has slowed, the thick mixture now only allowing a bubble to surface every few seconds. Blup, pause, blup. Each one is a small explosion of aroma, a reminder that the meal is nearly ready. There is no rush to eat. In this time, in this place, the preparation is as important as the consumption. The act of tending the fire, of grinding the grain, of stirring the pot, these are the rhythms that define the day. They are the small, manageable tasks that provide a sense of order in a world that can be harsh and unpredictable. Within the circle of the roundhouse, everything is controlled, everything is known, and everything is moving at the pace of the slow-burning oak. The wool of the tunic feels heavy against the shoulders, a warm, slightly scratchy embrace that has become a second skin. It smells of the sheep from which it was shorn, a faint, lanolin scent that mingles with the smoke of the hearth. The texture is coarse and irregular, the result of hand spinning and hand weaving, a physical connection to the landscape and the animals that inhabit it. As the body moves with the rhythm of the stirring, the wool shifts and settles, its weight providing a sense of grounding and security. The floor beneath the feet is solid and cool, the hard-packed clay having absorbed the ambient temperature of the room. Near the hearth, the earth is bone-dry and dusted with a fine layer of gray ash, while further out near the walls, it retains a hint of the winter's dampness. The transition between these zones is a subtle, tactile map of the home, a reminder of where the warmth begins and ends. The stirring spoon is finally lifted from the pot. It is heavy, coated in a thick, steaming layer of porridge that clings to the wood. As it is held over the cauldron, a single, large dollop of the mixture slides off the spoon and falls back into the pot with a heavy thud. The surface of the porridge remains indented for a moment before the viscous liquid slowly flows back to fill the gap. The texture is perfect, smooth, rich, and incredibly dense. The fire is given one final, gentle nudge with the tongs. A small piece of charcoal is moved closer to the center, ensuring the heat remains steady for the final minutes of the simmer. The light from the embers reflects in the dark, polished surface of the iron cauldron, creating a flickering, miniature world of orange and red against the black metal. Outside, the silence of the snow remains unbroken. The world is a vast, white void, where the trees are mere skeletons and the rivers are locked in ice. But here, in the heart of the roundhouse, the air is thick with the scent of a meal well made. The porridge continues to bubble on the slow fire, a golden promise of warmth and strength against the midwinter cold. The morning stretches on, unhurried and peaceful, a slow-motion dance of steam and shadow, grain and fire in the ancient, quiet hills of Britain. Every detail of the room seems to hum with a quiet, domestic energy. The way the light catches the edge of the ceramic jar, the way the smoke curls around the blackened rafters, the way the spoon feels in the hand, all of it contributes to a sense of profound, immovable peace. There is nowhere else to be, and nothing else to do but to wait for the fire to complete its work. The porridge is ready, yet it lingers, absorbing the final traces of the heat, becoming more than just food, but a part of the house itself. The steam has begun to thin slightly as the water is fully absorbed, leaving behind a concentrated aromatic essence. The room is quiet, save for the occasional crackle of the ash log and the soft, wet sound of the last few bubbles breaking the surface of the meal. It is the peak of the morning's tranquility, a moment of absolute stillness before the first bowl is poured. The slow fire continues its steady glow, and the porridge remains, a warm, golden heart at the center of the winter world. The iron cauldron remains the steady, unmoving center of the universe within the roundhouse, its black, soot-dusted surface holding a heat so profound it seems to vibrate with a low, silent energy. The porridge inside has reached its zenith, a thick, creamy, and deeply aromatic mass that has absorbed every drop of the spring water and every grain of the hand-ground oats. The fire beneath has settled into a state of glowing dormancy, the flames having long since retreated to leave behind a bed of white-hot embers that pulse with a soft, crimson light. This is the period of the resting heat, where the cooking is no longer an active struggle of flame against metal, but a gentle, atmospheric exchange of warmth. Beside the hearth, the attention shifts from the cauldron to the vessels that will receive its bounty. On a low, heavy bench made of split oak, 3 wooden bowls sit in a neat, silent row. These bowls are not mass-produced objects of utility. They are individual pieces of history, each one carved by hand from the heartwood of an alder tree that grew in the valley before the last great winter. The wood is dense and heavy, stained a deep, rich brown by years of use, and the repeated application of nut oils to keep the grain from cracking in the dry heat of the fire. To touch the rim of such a bowl is to feel the labor of the carver. There are microscopic ridges where the small, curved blade of the woodworking knife once pared away the excess wood, leaving behind a surface that is smooth but never perfectly flat. The grain of the wood swirls across the interior of the bowl like the eddies in a slow-moving stream, creating a visual map of the tree's life. Years of slow growth, years of sudden rain, years of long, hot summers. The base of the bowl is thick and solid, giving it a low center of gravity that ensures it sits firmly upon the uneven surface of the oak bench. There is a profound sense of permanence in these objects, a feeling that they have existed forever and will continue to exist long after the snow has melted. Next to the bowls lies the ladle. It is a massive implement, fashioned from the pale, translucent horn of a long-haired ox. The horn has been boiled and pressed until it is wide and shallow, capable of holding a substantial portion of the heavy porridge. The handle is long and slightly curved, made of seasoned ash wood, and joined to the horn with small, handmade copper rivets that have turned a dull, dark bronze over time. The ladle feels balanced in the hand, its weight distributed so that it pivots easily around the wrist, a tool designed for the specific, repetitive motion of serving. The act of ladling the porridge is a study in slow motion. The ladle is lowered into the cauldron, its horn edge breaking the thick, shimmering surface of the oats with a soft, wet slop. There is a momentary resistance. The porridge is so dense now that it acts almost like a solid, pushing back against the ladle. But as the horn is pressed deeper, the mixture yields, flowing over the rim and filling the bowl of the ladle with a steaming, golden brown mass. When the ladle is lifted, it carries a heavy, dripping weight. A thick ribbon of porridge clings to the underside of the horn, stretching out in a long, viscous strand that eventually breaks and falls back into the cauldron with a muffled, satisfying thud. The steam that rises from the ladle is intense, a concentrated burst of oat, honey, and cream that briefly obscures the face of the server. It is a warm, damp cloud that smells of safety and the end of hunger. The porridge is poured into the first wooden bowl. It does not splash. It is too thick for that. Instead, it slides from the horn ladle in a single, cohesive movement, stacking upon itself in the bottom of the bowl in a series of heavy, undulating folds. As the bowl fills, the weight of the porridge makes the wood creak almost imperceptibly against the oak bench. The heat is transferred instantly from the grain to the wood, the alder warming up until the bowl itself begins to radiate a soft, woody fragrance that mingles with the scent of the meal. The process is repeated for the second bowl, and then the third. Dip, lift, pour. The rhythm is hypnotic, a sequence of movements that has been performed in this same spot over this same hearth for as long as anyone can remember. There is no urgency to the task. The porridge is so hot that it will remain steaming for a long time, and the fire is still providing a steady, underlying warmth that keeps the chill of the room at bay. Once the bowls are filled, they sit in a row, 3 small pools of golden brown heat in the dim light of the roundhouse. The surface of the porridge in each bowl is not flat. It retains the texture of the pour, with peaks and valleys that catch the flickering light of the embers. A small amount of steam continues to rise from each one, twisting and turning in the still air like ghost ribbons. It is a sight of immense comfort, the culmination of the morning's labor, presented in the simple, honest beauty of wood and grain. In the background, the room itself seems to settle further into its winter slumber. The walls, thick with layers of clay and straw, are silent. The only sound is the occasional, distant crump of snow sliding off the steep pitch of the thatched roof outside, a muffled sound that only serves to emphasize the solidity and security of the interior. The air is heavy and still, the kind of air that encourages deep breaths and slow thoughts. The seating area around the hearth has been prepared with equal care. The low benches are covered in thick, unclipped sheepskins, the wool long and curly and smelling of lanolin and clean mountain air. Beneath the benches, the floor is layered with fresh rushes, their green-gold stalks providing a springy, insulating carpet that keeps the feet away from the cool earth. There is a softness to the environment now, a blurring of edges as the firelight softens and the shadows deepen in the corners of the room. The fire is now at its most beautiful stage. The ash log has finally surrendered its form, collapsing into a heap of glowing coals that look like a city of tiny, subterranean lights. There are no more flames, only this intense, steady radiance. If you watch closely, you can see the colors shift, from a brilliant, searing orange to a deep, blood red, and then to a pale, ghostly violet as the heat gradually dissipates into the stones of the hearth. The stones themselves have become reservoirs of warmth, having absorbed the fire's energy all morning. They will continue to radiate this heat for hours, ensuring the roundhouse stays comfortable long after the meal is finished. One's hand might reach out to touch the wool of the sheepskin. It is incredibly soft, the fibers trapping the warmth of the room and holding it against the skin. It is a tactile reminder of the interconnectedness of life here. The sheep that graze the hills provide the warmth for the bed and the clothes for the body, while the fields provide the grain for the bowl. Everything has a purpose, everything has a place, and everything moves in a slow, seasonal cycle that is as predictable as the rising of the sun. The silence of the room is now so profound that the soft, rhythmic breathing of someone resting in the shadows becomes audible, a gentle, steady sound that matches the pulse of the glowing embers. The world outside, with its freezing winds and biting frost, feels like a dream, a distant and unimportant reality. Here, inside the circle of the walls, there is only the warmth, the scent of the porridge, and the slow, heavy passage of time. The wooden bowls, now fully warmed by their contents, are ready. But still, there is no hurry. The porridge is allowed to sit for a few minutes, a final rest that allows the flavors to settle and the temperature to drop to a level that is comfortable for eating. During this time, the surface of the porridge develops a very thin, silken skin, a sign of its richness and the high quality of the oats. It is a delicate, translucent layer that shimmers in the firelight, protecting the heat within. Beside the bowls, 3 small spoons are laid out. These are made of apple wood, a fruit wood that is prized for its tight grain and smooth finish. The spoons are small and shallow, designed for taking small, deliberate bites. The wood has a slightly sweet scent of its own, a faint echo of the orchards that bloom in the valley during the brief, intense British summer. Each spoon is unique, with its own particular curve and its own pattern of knots and grain, reflecting the branch from which it was carved. The atmosphere in the roundhouse is now one of total, undisturbed peace. The boring reality of the winter morning, the lack of activity, the repetitive tasks, the gray light, has been transformed into a sanctuary of the senses. Every detail, from the texture of the sheepskin to the glow of the embers to the scent of the resting porridge, contributes to a feeling of absolute safety and contentment. There is no conflict here, no drama, no sudden movements. There is only the slow fire, the heavy grain, and the quiet endurance of a life lived in harmony with the rhythm of the earth. The steam from the bowls has begun to thin, the plumes becoming more delicate as the porridge cools. The room is a tapestry of low light and soft textures, a place where the mind can finally let go of its worries and simply exist in the present moment. The journey from the raw, hard grain in the basket to the steaming, honey-sweetened meal in the bowl is complete. It was a journey of hours, of steady hands and patient fires, and the result is a nourishment that goes far beyond the physical. Outside, a single stray snowflake might find its way through the smoke hole at the peak of the thatch, drifting down through the warm air like a tiny white feather. It disappears long before it reaches the hearth, melted by the rising column of warm air, a brief and silent reminder of the winter that waits beyond the walls. But inside, the circle remains unbroken. The bowls are full, the fire is deep, and the morning remains a vast, unhurried expanse of quietude. The heavy iron cauldron, now mostly empty, still hangs from its chain, its dark shape a familiar silhouette against the red glow of the hearth. It will sit there until it is time to be cleaned, another slow, rhythmic task for another time. For now, its work is done. The ladle is rested across the top of the pot, its horned surface catching the last of the intense heat. Everything is still. Everything is quiet. The porridge waits in the bowls, the spoons wait on the bench, and the slow fire continues its long, slow fade into the afternoon. The light in the room is soft and amber, the kind of light that makes the eyes heavy and the limbs feel like lead. It is the light of a world that has no need for clocks, a world where the only schedule is the one set by the stomach and the sun. The silence is a blanket, the warmth is a cradle, and the meal is a promise kept. In this ancient corner of Britain, under the heavy thatch and behind the thick walls, the midwinter morning is a masterpiece of slow, beautiful monotony. The moment has arrived to finally partake in the labor of the morning, yet there is still no sense of haste. In the ancient British winter, time does not march. It meanders like a slow, frozen stream. The 3 wooden bowls sit upon the heavy oak bench, their contents resting in a state of quiet, steaming perfection. The first bowl is lifted. It is heavy, surprisingly so. The alder wood, having absorbed the heat of the porridge, feels alive in the hands. It is a solid, grounding weight that anchors the person to the seat. A low stool carved from a single block of elm and covered with a thick, unclipped fleece. The wool of the fleece is springy and deep, providing a cushioned barrier between the body and the cool earth of the roundhouse floor. To hold the bowl is to feel the immediate transfer of energy. The heat of the fire, once stored in the oak logs, then transferred to the iron of the cauldron, then to the water and the grain, now passes through the thick walls of the wooden bowl and into the palms of the hands. It is a gentle, pervasive warmth that begins at the fingertips and slowly travels up the arms, loosening the muscles that have spent the morning tending the hearth. The texture of the wood is fascinating under the thumb. There is a small knot near the rim, a hard, swirling focal point where the branch once joined the trunk. It is smooth as polished bone, worn down by years of being held in exactly this way. The spoon, made of pale applewood, is picked up next. It is light, almost weightless compared to the bowl. The grain of the applewood is tight and fine, and the bowl of the spoon is shallow, perfectly shaped for small, contemplative sips. As the spoon is dipped into the porridge, the thin, silken skin that has formed on the surface is broken. It parts with a microscopic resistance, revealing the rich, creamy interior that is still pulsing with a subterranean heat. The spoon comes up full, carrying a mound of golden brown oats that are so thick they hold their shape, standing in a soft, rounded peak. Before the first bite is taken, the steam must be addressed. It rises from the spoon in a delicate, shifting plume, a miniature weather system of heat and aroma. The steam is moist and heavy, carrying the concentrated scent of the Highmore honey and the toasted richness of the ground grain. When you blow gently upon the spoon, the sound is a soft, rhythmic woo, a sound that mimics the distant wind outside but carries none of its bite. The steam reacts to the breath, swirling in chaotic, beautiful patterns before dissipating into the amber light of the room. This act of cooling the porridge is a ritual in itself, a moment of forced patience that ensures the first taste is one of comfort rather than pain. The first taste is a revelation of texture and temperature. As the wooden spoon touches the lips, the wood feels neutral, neither hot nor cold, but the porridge it carries is a dense, velvety weight. It moves into the mouth with a slow, viscous grace, coating the tongue in a layer of heat that is both intense and soothing. The flavor is a complex tapestry. First, the deep, earthy nuttiness of the oats, followed closely by the floral, sun-drenched sweetness of the honey. Then comes the salt, the tiny, sharp crystals of the sea that have fully dissolved but remain as a grounding force, heightening the sweetness and giving the grain a savory depth. The texture of the oats is remarkable. They have been cooked for so long on the slow fire that they have lost all their harsh edges, yet they have not turned into a featureless mush. Each individual groat is a tiny, soft pearl that gives way under the slightest pressure, releasing a burst of creamy starch. It is a tactile experience that requires slow, deliberate chewing, even though the meal is soft. Every movement of the jaw is a rhythmic, meditative action that encourages the mind to settle deeper into the stillness of the room. When the porridge is swallowed, the sensation is one of profound internal transformation. The heat travels down the throat in a slow, glowing coal of warmth, settling in the center of the chest before radiating outward toward the stomach. It is as if a small, secondary hearth has been lit within the body, a mirror to the fire that glows in the center of the roundhouse. The chill that always lingers in the extremities during a British winter, the cold in the toes and the faint numbness in the ears, begins to retreat, pushed back by the steady, rising tide of caloric warmth. The silence in the roundhouse during this time is heavy and golden. The only sounds are the soft, rhythmic scrape of the applewood spoon against the alder bowl, a dry musical scritch, and the occasional wet sound of the porridge being stirred within the vessel. These sounds are small, but in the absolute quiet of the snow-muffled landscape, they feel significant. They are the sounds of life continuing, of a successful stand against the elements. Outside, the frost is hardening on the branches of the oaks, and the ice is thickening on the ponds, but here, the air is thick with the steam of the meal and the breath of the living. Between bites, the bowl is held close to the face, the rising steam acting as a warm veil. The eyes can rest upon the surface of the remaining porridge, watching as the heat causes tiny, invisible currents to shift the cream and honey. The light from the hearth, now reduced to a deep, steady crimson, reflects in the gloss of the mixture, creating a shifting map of orange and red highlights. The shadows in the room have become even more pronounced, the corners of the roundhouse disappearing into a soft, velvety blackness that feels protective rather than threatening. The wool of the tunic draped over the shoulders feels heavier now, as if the warmth of the meal has added a physical weight to the fabric. The scent of the wool, that faint, lanolin smell mixed with the ever-present wood smoke, is a constant, reassuring companion. It is the smell of the flock, the smell of the land, and the smell of the many winters that have come before this one. To live in this time is to be constantly aware of these scents, to know them as the markers of safety and home. The second spoonful is taken with even more deliberation than the first. There is no need to hurry. The bowl is thick and holds the heat with stubborn persistence. The porridge at the edges of the bowl has cooled slightly more than the center, creating a subtle gradient of temperature that adds interest to the experience. One might use the spoon to draw a small amount of the hotter center into the cooler edge, watching as the two textures blend and swirl together in a slow-motion dance of cream and grain. The mind begins to drift as the body is nourished. It wanders to the fields where the oats were grown, imagining them under the high, bright sun of the previous August. The memory of the heat, The dry, buzzing warmth of the summer is contained within the grain, waiting to be released by the fire of the winter hearth. It is a beautiful cycle. The sun provides the energy for the grain, the wood provides the energy for the fire, and the two are brought together in the cauldron to provide the energy for the people. In the roundhouse, this cycle is tangible, a lived reality that is felt in every bite. As the meal progresses, the level of the porridge in the bowl slowly drops, revealing the internal grain of the alder wood. The wood is stained a darker shade of brown where the porridge has sat, the oils from the grain and the cream soaking into the fibers and further seasoning the vessel. This bowl has seen many such meals, and each one adds to its history, its surface becoming a record of the winters it has helped the inhabitants to survive. There is a deep satisfaction in using tools that have such a long and quiet lineage. The fire in the hearth has reached a state of ultimate stability. The white ash that covers the embers acts as a perfect insulator, allowing the heat to bleed out at a rate that is almost imperceptibly slow. Occasionally, a single spark will migrate from one coal to another, a tiny, silent point of light that travels through the ash like a falling star. The stones of the hearth are now so hot that they would hiss if a drop of water were to fall upon them. But for now, they are dry and silent, radiating a heat that feels like a solid wall of comfort. The feet, resting on the layer of rushes and sheepskins, have finally begun to feel the warmth. The cold that had seeped in from the door earlier in the morning is gone, replaced by a tingle of returning circulation. The rushes beneath the feet release a faint, grassy scent as they are compressed, a ghost of the wetlands where they were gathered. Everything in the room is contributing its own small sensory note to the symphony of the morning, creating a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. There is a profound sense of boredom that is not negative, but rather a form of high-level peace. There is nothing to do but eat the porridge. There is nothing to listen to but the breath and the fire. There is nothing to see but the steam and the shadows. This lack of stimulation is the ultimate luxury of the winter. It is a time for the spirit to rest, to pull inward and consolidate its strength, just as the trees have pulled their sap down into their roots. The boring nature of the task is its greatest virtue, allowing the nervous system to settle into a state of total, hypnotic calm. The porridge is now halfway gone. The steam has thinned, but the warmth remains constant. The flavors have fully melded now, the honey having permeated every single grain until the distinction between the sweet and the savory has completely vanished. It is a singular, unified experience of nourishment. The spoon moves back and forth, bowl to mouth bowl, in a rhythm that has become entirely subconscious. The arm moves with a heavy, relaxed grace, the muscles requiring almost no conscious effort to perform the familiar task. Outside, the world remains a vast, unmoving white. The snow is likely still falling, though it is impossible to tell from within the thick walls of the roundhouse. The silence is the only indicator of the weather, a silence that is so heavy it seems to press against the thatch. But inside, the world is golden and brown, smelling of salt and oats and ancient wood. The bowl is a small, portable hearth. The spoon is a bridge between the fire and the body, and the meal is a slow, beautiful meditation on survival. The light from the window slit is a pale, milky gray, the only hint that the sun is somewhere above the clouds. It casts a soft, shadowless light over the corner where the storage jars sit, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air. The smoke from the hearth rises in its steady, unhurried spiral, a constant connection between the earth and the sky. Everything is in balance. Everything is as it should be. The porridge continues to be eaten, one slow, deliberate spoonful at a time, as the ancient British morning stretches out into an eternity of peace and warmth. The bowl is held with both hands now, the fingers wrapping around the curved sides to soak up the last of the intense heat. The weight of the bowl is a comfort, a physical presence that demands attention and respect. As the bottom of the bowl is reached, the spoon makes a slightly different sound, a clearer, more resonant tink as it meets the thin layer of wood at the base. These last few bites are the most concentrated, the thickest, and most flavorful parts of the meal that have sat the longest against the warm alder. They are savored with a patience that borders on the sacred. The meal is not just food, it is a ceremony of the mundane. It is the recognition that in the middle of a freezing wilderness, the simple act of boiling grain on a slow fire is an act of defiance and beauty. It is a testament to the wisdom of the ancestors who learned how to grind the stone, how to forge the iron, and how to harness the spirit of the oak. As the final spoonful is lifted, there is a sense of completion, a closing of a circle that began hours ago in the gray light of the dawn. The bottom of the wooden bowl is now visible, a curved expanse of dark alder wood that has been polished to a high sheen by the passage of the applewood spoon. There is a lingering residue of the porridge, a thin, translucent film of oat cream and honey that clings to the grain of the wood. This residue is beginning to cool, its texture shifting from a liquid state to something more substantial, a tacky glaze that captures the flickering light of the hearth. The act of gathering these final remnants is a task of profound focus, a slow and methodical scraping that produces a dry, rhythmic sound against the wood. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It is the sound of a morning coming to its natural conclusion, a sound that is as much a part of the roundhouse as the crackle of the oak logs or the sigh of the wind in the thatch. Beside the bowl, a small crust of bread rests upon the oak bench. This bread is not the light, airy loaf of a modern kitchen, but a dense, dark cake of barley and rye baked days ago on the hot stones of the hearth. Its crust is thick and rugged, a landscape of toasted ridges and deep, charred valleys that smell of fermented grain and the ghost of the fire. When a piece is broken off, the sound is a low, muffled snap, a dry vibration that can be felt in the tips of the fingers. The interior of the bread is tight-knit and moist, with a coarse texture that is designed for one specific purpose: to clean the bowl. The piece of bread is held between the thumb and the first two fingers. It is pressed against the interior wall of the alder bowl and moved in a slow, clockwise circle. The rough surface of the barley bread acts as a sponge, lifting the remaining film of porridge from the wood. As the bread moves, it creates a soft, abrasive friction, a hush-hush sound that replaces the metallic clink of the earlier morning. The process is thorough. Every curve of the bowl, from the deep center to the slightly flared rim, is wiped clean. The hand moves with a steady, unhurried grace, ensuring that not a single drop of the precious honey or a single grain of the oats is wasted. As the bread absorbs the moisture, it softens, its dark, porous surface becoming coated in the golden brown cream of the meal. The scent of the toasted barley mingles with the sweetness of the porridge residue, creating a final, concentrated aroma that is the very essence of the winter pantry. This final morsel is the most flavorful part of the experience, a dense, chewy bite that combines the crunch of the crust with the silken richness of the slow-boiled oats. It is eaten slowly, the jaw moving in a rhythmic, hypnotic pattern that encourages the mind to settle into a state of deep, post-meal lethargy. Once the bowl is clean, it is set back down upon the bench. It is no longer heavy with food, but it still retains a significant amount of heat. The wood feels warm and dry against the palm, a comforting presence in the cooling air of the room. The spoon is rested inside the bowl, its pale applewood handle leaning against the dark rim. Together, they form a still life of domestic peace, a silent testimony to the success of the morning's endeavor. The task is finished, yet the stillness of the roundhouse remains, a heavy and golden atmosphere that seems to suspend time itself. The attention now turns to the iron cauldron. It still hangs from the tripod, though it has been swung slightly to the side, away from the direct heat of the embers. A small amount of porridge remains at the very bottom, a thick, bubbling layer that continues to release a faint, occasional plume of steam. This is the pot gold, the portion that has been closest to the fire for the longest time. It is darker than the rest, almost caramelized, with a deep, nutty flavor that is the hallmark of a truly slow fire. To clean the cauldron is a different kind of labor. It requires a heavy wooden scraper, fashioned from a flat piece of oak with a sharp, beveled edge. The scraper is lowered into the pot, its edge meeting the iron with a dull, resonant thud. The sound echoes within the hollow chamber of the cauldron, a low-frequency vibration that ripples through the air. The scraper is moved back and forth, lifting the thickened oats from the metal. The resistance is high. The porridge has become like a heavy clay, clinging to the iron with a stubborn persistence. Each stroke of the scraper is a deliberate application of strength, a slow and rhythmic effort that matches the steady pulse of the hearth. As the bottom of the pot is cleared, the iron is revealed. It is black and pitted, a rugged surface that has been forged in fire and tempered by 1,000 meals. There is a strange beauty in the texture of the metal, the way it catches the light in its microscopic indentations, the way it holds the heat long after the flames have died. The scraper moves in a final, circular motion, gathering the last of the mixture into a single, dense mass. This is removed and placed into a smaller ceramic jar to be saved for later, a concentrated essence of the morning that will be added to the evening's broth. The room has grown quieter now, if such a thing is possible. The light from the window slit has shifted, the pale gray of the morning becoming a slightly more luminous pearl as the sun reaches its highest point behind the thick, unmoving clouds. The shadows have retreated slightly from the center of the room, gathering instead in the deep recesses of the thatch and behind the heavy storage chests that line the walls. The air is still, a thick and silent medium that carries the scent of wood smoke and cooling grain. The fire requires one last tending before the afternoon slumber can begin. The bed of embers is vast and glowing, a subterranean city of red and orange lights buried beneath a fine shroud of white ash. Using the iron tongs, The remaining fragments of the ash log are pushed together into a tight, compact mound at the center of the hearth. This concentration of heat ensures that the fire will stay alive for many hours more, smoldering slowly in its own warmth. A new log is selected from the stack, a piece of seasoned hawthorn, heavy and dense, with a bark that is dark and deeply fissured. Hawthorn is a slow-burning wood, prized for the steady, intense heat it provides. It is placed carefully atop the embers. There is no sudden burst of flame. Instead, the wood sits silently in the heat, its surface beginning to char as the energy of the embers is transferred into its core. A thin, wispy trail of smoke begins to rise from a crack in the bark, a pale ribbon of incense that joins the slow, upward spiral toward the roof. This log will be the guardian of the afternoon, a source of quiet, unwavering warmth that will keep the frost from the door. The floor of the roundhouse, covered in its thick layers of rushes and sheepskins, feels incredibly inviting. The body, now warm from the inside out and heavy with the weight of the meal, seeks the softness of the seating area. The sheepskins are rearranged with a slow, rustling sound, the sound of wool against wool, a soft and muffled friction. As one sinks into the fleece, the fibers compress, trapping the air and creating a warm, insulating cocoon. The wool is long and curly, a tactile landscape that is both soft and supportive. It smells of the high pastures, a clean and earthy scent that is infinitely soothing. From this low vantage point, the world of the roundhouse takes on a different perspective. The hearth is at eye level, its glowing heart a hypnotic focal point in the dim room. The underside of the cauldron is visible, a dark and soot-covered dome that seems to float above the embers. The legs of the tripod cast long, spindly shadows across the floor, shadows that shift almost imperceptibly as the light from the fire pulses and fades. Every object in the room, the wooden bowls, the ceramic jars, the iron tools, seems to have settled into its place, a part of a larger, silent harmony. The silence is punctuated only by the smallest of sounds, the occasional tink of the cooling iron, the soft thump of a single snowflake hitting the thatch above, the rhythmic, heavy breathing of the house itself. It is a boredom so profound that it becomes a form of meditation, a state of being where the mind is free from the clutter of thought and the body is free from the demands of action. There is nothing to do but watch the smoke rise, feel the warmth of the fire, and listen to the silence of the winter. Outside, the snow is now deep against the walls of the roundhouse, providing a natural insulation that further muffles the world. The drift has likely reached the height of the low stone foundation, a white wall of frozen water that stands between the interior and the wilderness. The trees in the forest beyond are silent, their branches weighted down by the heavy, wet snow, their life processes slowed to a crawl. The entire landscape is in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the return of the light. But inside, the light never truly leaves. It is contained within the oak and the hawthorn, released slowly by the grace of the hearth. It is reflected in the polished wood of the bowls and the dark surface of the iron. It is felt in the warmth of the porridge and the softness of the wool. The roundhouse is a sanctuary of light and heat, a small, circular universe where the laws of the winter are held at bay by the simple, repetitive acts of the morning. The heaviness in the limbs is now absolute. The eyelids feel weighted, as if by tiny, invisible stones of lead. The warmth of the room has seeped into every pore, relaxing the muscles and slowing the heartbeat to a steady, peaceful thrum. The mind drifts back to the porridge, the way it bubbled, the way the honey swirled, the way the steam rose. These images repeat in a slow, hypnotic loop, a mental rhythm that matches the circular movement of the stirring spoon. The hawthorn log has finally begun to catch. A small, blue-tinged flame licks out from a knot in the wood, a silent and graceful movement that adds a flicker of movement to the shadows. It does not crackle or pop. It is a quiet flame, a steady consumer of the wood's energy. The heat it radiates is a physical presence, a soft pressure against the skin that encourages the eyes to close. In this state of half-slumber, the sounds of the roundhouse become more vivid. The scrape of the spoon, the slosh of the water, the grind of the stone, all these sounds from the morning echo faintly in the memory, creating a soundscape of domestic security. They are the sounds of survival, the sounds of a life that is slow, deliberate, and entirely contained within the rhythm of the seasons. There is no past and no future in this moment. There is only the heat of the fire, the scent of the smoke, and the profound, beautiful boredom of the ancient winter. The steam from the cauldron has finally ceased, the last of the moisture having been driven off or absorbed. The room is now dry and warm, the air heavy with the lingering scent of the oats and the fresh, sharp smell of the hawthorn. Everything is ready for the long, quiet hours of the afternoon. The bowls are clean, the fire is banked, and the sanctuary is secure. The world of the roundhouse is a perfect circle, a loop of warmth and peace that remains unbroken as the snow continues its silent descent over the hills of Britain. The last thought before the mind surrenders to sleep is of the porridge, the simple golden meal that has provided the strength for another day. It is a humble thing, yet in this time and place, it is everything. It is the sun, the rain, the earth, and the fire, all brought together in a single wooden bowl. And as the fire glows and the shadows stretch, the peace of the midwinter morning becomes a deep and dreamless rest. The heavy, satisfied lethargy that follows a midwinter meal has now fully descended upon the roundhouse, a thick and invisible blanket that wraps around the senses. The 3 wooden bowls remain on the oak bench, their interiors gleaming with a faint, oily residue that catches the dying light of the afternoon. The air in the room is remarkably still, a suspension of wood smoke and warmth that seems to vibrate with the low-humming silence of the falling snow outside. However, the cycle of the hearth never truly ends, and even in this state of deep hypnotic rest, there is a quiet, rhythmic labor that calls for attention. The iron cauldron, the great dark vessel that bore the morning's nourishment, still hangs from its blackened chain, and its care is a task of singular focus and slow, deliberate motion. To clean the cauldron is to engage with the very bones of the home. It is lifted from the tripod with a slow, straining effort, the iron chain clinking with a heavy, metallic melody that echoes against the curved walls. Clink-clank, clink-clank. Each link of the chain is a hand-forged circle of dark metal, worn smooth at the points of contact by years of supporting the weight of 100,000 meals. As the cauldron is lowered to the floor near the hearth, its rounded base meets the hard-packed earth with a solid, muffled thump that vibrates through the soles of the feet. The pot is warm to the touch, not the searing heat of the fire, but a deep, resonant warmth that the thick iron has stored within its cellular structure. A large ceramic jar of rinse water stands ready. This water was brought in from the stream at the same time as the cooking water, and it has sat near the fire, losing its icy bite but remaining cool and refreshing. As the water is poured into the cauldron, the sound is a sudden, bright splash, a crystalline contrast to the thick, wet sounds of the boiling porridge. The liquid hits the bottom of the pot, swirling around the dark, pitted surface of the iron, instantly turning a cloudy, milky white as it picks up the remnants of the oats and the cream. The visual of the white water against the black metal is striking, a miniature storm of starch and shadow contained within the circular walls of the vessel. The cleaning tool is a bundle of dried heather stalks, bound tightly together with a cord of twisted hemp. The heather is tough and wiry, its tiny, dried bells providing a natural abrasive that is gentle enough for the iron but firm enough to lift the stubborn residue of the slow-boiled grain. The hand grasps the handle of the heather bundle. The wood is rough and textured, the scent of the dried moorland plants still clinging to the fibers. With a slow, circular motion, the scrubbing begins. Scritch hush. Scritch hush. The sound is rhythmic and repetitive, a dry, rasping noise that fills the quiet room with a sense of purposeful monotony. The resistance of the heather against the iron is constant. The hand moves from the center of the pot's floor toward the curved sides, following the internal anatomy of the vessel. Every inch of the metal is treated with the same meticulous care. The starch from the oats has formed a thin, stubborn layer that requires a steady, unwavering pressure to dislodge. As the scrubbing continues, the water in the pot becomes thicker and more opaque, a swirling emulsion of the morning's history. There is no hurry to this task. The goal is not merely cleanliness, but the preservation of the tool that ensures survival. To rush the cleaning of the cauldron would be to disrespect the fire and the grain. Occasionally, the scrubbing pauses, and the heather bundle is lifted. The water drips from the stalks back into the pot with a series of soft, musical plips. The sound is tiny, but in the silence of the roundhouse, it is as clear as a bell. A coarse wool rag, woven from the dark, undyed fleece of a mountain sheep, is then used to wipe away the loosened residue. The rag is heavy and slightly greasy with lanolin, a quality that helps it to glide over the iron while simultaneously protecting the metal from the damp. The texture of the wool against the iron is a soft, muffled friction, a shh whip sound that replaces the rasp of the heather. The process is repeated. More water is added, the splash echoing once more, followed by the rhythmic return of the scrubbing and the wiping. Slowly, the true surface of the iron is revealed. It is a rugged, honest landscape of hammer marks and cooling lines, a surface that has been tempered by countless cycles of heating and cooling. As the last of the water is tipped out into a drainage bucket, a heavy wooden pail made of oak staves and iron hoops, the interior of the cauldron is left damp and dark, reflecting the crimson glow of the hearth like a black mirror. Once the cauldron is clean, it is not returned to the tripod immediately. Instead, it is turned upside down near the edge of the hearth stones. The heat from the embers will rise up into the hollow of the pot, drying the iron completely, and preventing the rust that the winter damp constantly tries to invite. The sight of the overturned cauldron, a dark dome of iron resting on the earth, is a symbol of a task completed, a quiet punctuation mark at the end of the morning's labor. The attention then shifts to the floor around the hearth. The activity of the morning, the grinding of the grain, the tending of the fire, the serving of the meal, has left its mark. A fine dusting of gray ash has settled upon the rushes, along with a few stray husks of grain and the microscopic debris of the woodstack. The cleaning of the floor is a task performed with a broom made of birch twigs. The twigs are thin and flexible, harvested in the late autumn when the sap had retreated and the wood was at its most resilient. They are bound to a handle of seasoned rowan wood, a wood believed to bring protection to the home. The sweeping is a slow, rhythmic dance. The broom moves in long, sweeping arcs, the birch twigs whispering against the dried rushes with a soft, rustling sound. Husha, husha. It is a sound of the wind in the trees, brought indoors and tamed. The dust and ash are gathered into a neat pile at the edge of the hearth, to be later returned to the fire or taken out to the garden patch when the snow melts. The movement of the broom is hypnotic, the body swaying in time with the strokes, the eyes following the path of the twigs as they clear the floor. The air in the roundhouse, though still, is filled with the motion of these small tasks. The light from the high window slit has begun to fade, the pearl gray of the afternoon deepening into a soft, bruised purple as the sun begins its long descent toward the horizon. The shadows in the room are no longer merely in the corners. They have begun to stretch out, claiming the floor and the walls, softening the edges of the furniture and the storage jars. The warmth of the hearth, however, remains a solid, unwavering presence, a wall of heat that defines the boundaries of the living space. The woodstack, too, requires a moment of logistical consideration. The morning's use has created a small gap in the neatly piled logs of oak and ash. To maintain the equilibrium of the home, this gap must be observed and the remaining fuel assessed. There is a deep, primal satisfaction in looking at a well-ordered woodstack. Each log is a story of a tree, a season of growth, and a day of labor with the axe. The oak logs are heavy and dark, their bark thick and rugged, while the ash logs are smoother, with a silver-gray sheen that seems to hold the light. The hawthorn, which now burns in the hearth, is the densest of all, a wood of high energy and slow, steady release. The touch of the wood is a sensory delight. The bark of the oak is rough and abrasive, with deep fissures that catch the skin of the palm. The ash is cooler, its surface almost silken in comparison. To move a log is to feel its solid, unyielding weight, a reminder of the physical reality of the winter. Each piece of wood is a promise of future warmth, a stored treasure that will be released in the coming days and nights. The organization of the stack is a ritual of survival, a way of imposing order upon the chaos of the wilderness that waits outside the walls. As the broom finishes its work and the cauldron sits in its drying warmth, the roundhouse reaches a new level of tranquility. The boring tasks of maintenance have been performed with the same care as the exciting task of cooking. There is no hierarchy of labor here. Every action is a necessary thread in the tapestry of the day. The silence that follows the sweeping is even more profound than the silence that preceded it. It is a clean, organized silence, a silence that has been earned. The walls of the roundhouse, composed of wattle and daub and covered in multiple layers of lime wash, seem to absorb the quiet. They are thick and insulating, a barrier of earth and straw that keeps the world at bay. If you place your hand against the wall, you can feel the coolness of the exterior world pressing against the warmth of the interior. The lime wash is slightly chalky to the touch, leaving a fine, white residue on the fingertips, a ghost of the earth that protects the inhabitants. The smell of the lime is faint and clean, a mineral top note that cuts through the heavy scent of the wood smoke and the oats. The thatch above is a vast, golden-brown landscape of reed and straw. In the dim light, it looks like the underside of a giant's cloak, heavy and protective. The smoke from the hearth continues to find its way through the intricate weave of the thatch, a constant, silent migration. Occasionally, the straw will settle with a tiny, dry creak, a sound of the house breathing under the weight of the snow. These small sounds are the punctuation marks of the afternoon, reminders that the roundhouse is a living, shifting entity, a participant in the winter along with the people it shelters. The seating area, with its fresh rushes and soft sheepskins, is now the ultimate destination. The body, having performed the cleaning and the sweeping, is ready to return to its state of rest. The transition from action to stillness is a slow process, a gradual unwinding of the muscles and a steady lowering of the heart rate. As one sinks back into the fleece, the wool seems to rise up to meet the body, a soft and warm embrace that swallows the fatigue of the morning. The view from the bench is one of absolute domestic peace. The hearth is a glowing orange eye in the center of the room, its heat a constant radiating force. The overturned cauldron, the clean wooden bowls, the neat pile of ash, the ordered wood stack, all of these elements create a sense of profound security. The world is small, it is known, and it is safe. The boredom of the environment is its greatest strength, providing a sanctuary where the mind can finally cease its constant wandering and simply be. The hawthorn log in the fire has now reached its peak. It is a solid mass of glowing orange, with a thin, dancing flame that licks the air with a silent grace. The light it casts is warm and flickering, creating a shifting tapestry of shadows across the floor. These shadows move in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, a visual echo of the circular movements of the morning. Round and round the light goes, following the curve of the walls, touching the storage jars, the tools, and the sleeping forms in the shadows. Outside, the light is almost gone. The transition from day to night in the British winter is a subtle and beautiful thing, a slow fading of the grays into a deep, velvety indigo. The snow continues its silent work, erasing the features of the landscape and burying the world in a cold, white peace. But inside the roundhouse, the cycle remains unbroken. The fire burns, the walls hold, and the sanctuary remains. The cleaning is done, the meal is a memory, and the afternoon is a vast, unhurried expanse of quietude. The sense of time has completely dissolved. There is no before and no after, only the present moment, the warmth of the wool, the glow of the embers, the scent of the wood smoke. It is a state of pure existence, a meditation on the simple reality of being alive in the heart of the winter. The boring history of the morning, the boiling of the porridge, the grinding of the grain, the cleaning of the pot, has led to this, a moment of absolute, undisturbed peace in the ancient hills of Britain. The mind drifts, caught in the loop of the firelight. It imagines the trees in the forest, standing silent and still under the weight of the snow. It imagines the rivers, moving slowly beneath their coats of ice. It imagines the birds, tucked away in the thickets, waiting for the dawn. All of nature is in this same state of resting heat, this same state of quiet endurance. The roundhouse is but a small, warm echo of the wider world's winter slumber. The final task of the afternoon is a small one. A single, small stone is placed near the edge of the hearth, a marker for the evening's work. It is a simple gesture, a way of acknowledging that the day will continue, that the fire will be tended, and that the cycle will begin again. But for now, there is only the rest. The cauldron is dry, the floor is swept, and the slow fire continues its long, beautiful fade into the evening. The transition from the pale, bruised purple of the late afternoon into the deep, velvety indigo of the winter evening is a slow and silent transformation within the hills of ancient Britain. Inside the roundhouse, the world has shrunk to the immediate radius of the hearth, where the hawthorn log continues its disciplined, glowing vigil. The light from the high window slit has vanished, replaced by a solid darkness that presses against the oiled animal bladder, yet the interior is far from dark. The fire provides a rich, amber illumination that dances across the lime-washed walls, casting long, wavering shadows that seem to breathe in time with the rhythmic pulse of the heat. In this hour of deepening stillness, the focus shifts to the preservation of the tools that have served the household so faithfully throughout the morning's long simmer. On the low oak bench, the wooden bowls and the applewood spoons have been cleaned and dried, but they now require a final act of care to protect them from the drying thirst of the hearth fire. A small ceramic crucible, no larger than a plum, sits near the edge of the warm stones. It contains a small amount of rendered linseed oil, mixed with a drop of clarified beeswax. The heat from the stones has turned the mixture into a clear, viscous liquid that shimmers like liquid gold in the firelight. The scent is faint but distinct, a clean, nutty aroma with a top note of floral sweetness from the wax. The act of oiling the wood is a masterpiece of monotonous, sensory detail. A small scrap of soft, well-worn linen is dipped into the warm oil. The fabric absorbs the liquid slowly, the golden stain spreading across the fibers in a jagged, darkening map. As the oil-soaked linen is pressed against the rim of the first alder bowl, there is a subtle change in the wood's appearance. The dry, pale surface of the alder instantly deepens into a rich, lustrous chestnut brown. The grain of the wood, previously a faint ghost of its former life, suddenly leaps into sharp relief. A complex, swirling architecture of lines and knots that tells the story of the tree's decades of growth. The movement of the hand is circular and slow. Rub, circle, press. The sound is a soft, rhythmic friction, a sliding, silken whisper of linen against wood. It is a tactile meditation. One can feel the microscopic texture of the grain through the cloth, the way the wood thirstily drinks the oil, pulling it deep into its fibers. The heat of the oil makes it move easily, allowing it to penetrate the smallest fissures and pores. As the bowl is rotated, the firelight catches the newly polished surface, creating a moving reflection that slides across the wood like water. Every inch of the bowl is treated with this meticulous reverence. The base, the curved interior, the flared rim, nothing is overlooked. The hand moves with a heavy, relaxed grace, the muscles requiring no thought to perform the familiar task. Once the first bowl is saturated, it is set aside on a clean patch of the rushes to rest. It glows with a soft, internal radiance, the oil providing a protective barrier against the dry winter air. The process is then repeated for the second bowl, and then the third. Dip, rub, circle, press. The repetition is hypnotic, a sequence of actions that anchors the mind in the present moment, far away from the freezing winds that howl across the moorland outside. The applewood spoons follow. They are smaller and more delicate, requiring a finer touch. The oil turns the pale wood into a warm, honey-hued amber. As the linen cloth moves over the carved bowl of the spoon, it makes a slightly higher-pitched sound, a delicate wish-wish that punctuates the silence of the room. The wood feels smooth and supple, the oil restoring the elasticity that the heat of the porridge and the fire might have leached away. There is a deep satisfaction in this act of maintenance, a recognition that these objects are not merely tools, but companions in the struggle for survival, deserving of the same care and attention as the fire itself. While the oiled wood rests, the attention turns to the leatherwork of the household. Near the woodstack lies a pair of winter boots, fashioned from thick, oil-tanned cowhide and lined with the soft, insulating fur of a mountain hare. The leather has been subjected to the dampness of the snow and the subsequent drying of the hearth, and it shows the first signs of stiffness. To treat the leather, a small pot of tallow is brought forward. Tallow is the rendered fat of the sheep, a heavy, white substance that is solid at room temperature but melts at the touch of a warm finger. A small amount of tallow is scooped out. It feels cool and waxy, but as it is rubbed between the palms, it softens, turning into a rich, slippery coating. The leather of the boots is massaged with the fat, the thumbs working the substance into the seams and the grain of the hide. This is a slower, more forceful labor than the oiling of the wood. The leather offers resistance, the thick hide requiring the heat and pressure of the hands to accept the nourishment. Squeak, rub, stretch. The sound of the leather being worked is a low, organic creak, a sound that evokes the presence of the animals and the enduring strength of the materials. The scent of the tallow is heavy and animalistic, a primal smell that speaks of the farm and the cycle of life. It mingles with the ever-present wood smoke and the faint, nutty aroma of the linseed oil, creating a complex sensory landscape within the roundhouse. As the tallow is absorbed, the leather loses its grayish, parched appearance, turning a deep, supple black that gleams in the amber light. The boots become flexible once more, ready to face the drifts of snow should the need arise to step beyond the threshold. The silence of the room is now so thick it feels as though the air itself has become denser. The only movement is the slow, rhythmic dance of the shadows and the occasional lazy rise of a spark from the hearth. The world outside the walls has effectively ceased to exist. There is no horizon, no sky, no forest, only the interior of the roundhouse, a circular sanctuary of heat and order. The boring reality of these domestic chores, oiling wood, greasing leather, tending the stack, is the very fabric of peace. In a world that can be harsh and unpredictable, these repetitive, predictable tasks provide a profound sense of control and security. The floor beneath the seating area is now a tapestry of textures. The fresh rushes, swept into order earlier, provide a springy, aromatic base. The sheepskins, with their long, lanolin-rich wool, offer a softness that invites the body to sink deeper into the shadows. One might reach out and run a hand over the surface of a nearby storage chest. It is made of heavy oak planks, joined with wooden pegs and bound with bands of dark iron. The wood is cool and solid, the iron feeling like a line of frozen water against the skin. These chests hold the wealth of the household, the extra wool, the dried fruits, the precious salt, and the tools of the coming spring. Above, the thatch continues to perform its silent duty. The smoke from the hearth, now a thin and steady stream, weaves through the golden-brown reeds before vanishing into the night. If you listen closely, you can hear the microscopic sounds of the house, the way the timber expands and contracts with the heat, the way the thatch settles under the weight of the accumulating snow, the way the air moves in the draft near the door. These are the heartbeats of the dwelling, a constant, low-level symphony of domestic life. The fire has now reached a state of perfect, glowing equilibrium. The hawthorn log has been partially consumed, its center a cavern of white-hot intensity, while its exterior remains a charred and blackened shell. The heat it radiates is a physical presence, a soft, dry pressure that encourages the blood to move slowly and the breath to deepen. The iron cauldron, still turned upside down near the stones, has reached its final state of dryness. Its surface is matte and dark, a silhouette of ultimate utility. The mind, lulled by the rhythmic tasks and the steady warmth, begins to drift into the realm of the abstract. It contemplates the nature of the circle, the circular walls of the house, the circular hearth, the circular movement of the stirring spoon, the circular cycle of the seasons. There is no beginning and no end in this world, only a continuous, slow-motion rotation around the center. The boredom of the environment is not a lack of interest, but a presence of stillness. It is the peace of the stone, the peace of the sleeping tree, the peace of the buried seed. A small bone needle is retrieved from a wooden sewing box. It is smooth and pale, polished by the passage through countless yards of wool and linen. A length of waxed hemp thread is passed through its eye, a task that requires a moment of intense, quiet focus. The thread is stiff and dark, smelling of the honeycomb from which the wax was taken. A small tear in a wool cloak, a heavy, indigo-dyed garment that hangs near the door, requires mending. The act of stitching is the pinnacle of the evening's monotony. The needle pierces the thick wool with a soft, muffled pop. The thread follows, whispering through the fibers as it is pulled tight. Stitch, pull, repeat. The rhythm is as steady as a heartbeat. The hand moves back and forth, weaving the broken edges of the fabric back together, erasing the damage of the winter briars. The indigo wool is coarse and heavy, the vegetable dye giving it a deep, earthy scent of woad and rain. As the repair progresses, the cloak regains its integrity, a silent victory over the wear and tear of the world. The light in the roundhouse is now at its most beautiful. The embers have settled into a deep, pulsing crimson, the color of a dying star. The shadows are long and soft, blurring the boundaries between the floor and the walls, the furniture and the air. The room feels like a single, unified entity, a cradle of warmth suspended in the heart of the frozen hills. The sense of time is completely gone. It could be the middle of the night or the early hours of the evening, and it would not matter. The only reality is the heat, the wool, the wood, and the slow, rhythmic movement of the needle. Outside, the snow is now so deep that it has likely covered the lower half of the doorway, creating a natural seal against the wind. The silence is absolute, a silence so profound that even the sound of one's own breathing feels like a disturbance. But inside, the silence is filled with the presence of the home. It is a silence that is alive with the history of the morning's porridge, the afternoon's cleaning, and the evening's mending. It is a silence that promises a deep and dreamless sleep. The mending is finished. The bone needle is returned to its box and the cloak is smoothed out, the repair almost invisible in the dim light. The leather boots are supple and dark, the wooden bowls are lustrous and protected, and the floor is clean and soft. Everything is in its place. The logistics of survival have been attended to with the same patience and care as the cooking of the oats. There is nothing left to do but exist in the warmth. The body, now heavy with a pleasant bone-deep fatigue, settles back into the sheepskins. The wool is a warm, scratchy embrace that slowly becomes a soft and weightless cloud. The smell of the room, wood smoke, grain, linseed, and lanolin, is a familiar and comforting perfume that signals the brain to let go. The eyes track the final, lazy movements of the firelight across the rafters, watching as the amber glow touches the bundles of dried herbs and the strings of apples. The boring history of the ancient British winter is a masterpiece of slow-motion peace. It is the recognition that in the heart of the darkness there is light, in the heart of the cold there is heat, and in the heart of the silence there is the steady, reassuring pulse of a life well tended. The porridge has been eaten, the tools have been cared for, and the fire continues to burn on its slow, steady fire, a golden heart at the center of the world. The deep, indigo mantle of the British midwinter night has now fully enveloped the roundhouse, pressing against the thick, lime-washed walls with a weight that is both immense and silent. Inside, the world has contracted to its most essential form, a circle of warmth, a scent of ancient wood, and the rhythmic, low-frequency pulse of a fire that has done its duty. The tasks of the morning and the maintenance of the afternoon have been completed with a slow and patient precision, and now, the logistics of the night begin to unfold. This is the time of the final banking, a ritual of fire tending that ensures the hearth will remain a living, breathing entity through the long, frozen hours until the first gray light of the morrow. The fire, which has been the beating heart of the dwelling since before the dawn, is now a vast landscape of glowing embers and skeletal charcoal. The hawthorn log has been reduced to a series of incandescent segments, glowing with a fierce, interior orange that seems to vibrate in the dim light. To bank the fire is not to extinguish it, but to cocoon it. Using a long, slightly charred branch of hazel, the remaining coals are gently gathered into the very center of the hearth pit. The movement is slow and deliberate, the wood making a soft, abrasive sound as it pushes through the layer of fine, white ash. Shh clink. Shh clink. Each coal moved is a tiny sun, releasing a momentary burst of heat and light before being nestled against its neighbors. Once the coals are concentrated into a tight, pulsing mound, the ash is used as an insulator. With a flat wooden shovel, carved from a single piece of seasoned oak, The ash from the outer edges of the hearth is lifted and draped over the embers. The ash is as light as fallen snow, a pulverized gray powder that smells of spent energy and mineral stillness. As it falls over the glowing coals, the bright orange light is gradually muffled, replaced by a soft, matte gray. The heat, however, is not lost. It is trapped, forced to linger within the center of the mound, where it will simmer with a slow and stubborn persistence. This living ash is the secret to the roundhouse's endurance, a thermal reservoir that will keep the floor warm and the air temperate through the darkest hours of the night. The sight of the banked fire is one of profound, hypnotic peace. A single, tiny point of red light might remain visible through a fissure in the ash, a solitary eye that watches over the sleeping house. The smoke, now reduced to a mere whisper of its former self, rises in a thin, translucent thread that is almost invisible in the darkness. It carries the final, sweet-scented essence of the hawthorn and the oak, a faint perfume that settles into the weave of the thatch. The air in the room is now perfectly still, a heavy and golden medium that seems to hold the history of the day's porridge and the afternoon's labor in a state of permanent suspension. Near the storage corner, the large ceramic water jar remains a silent sentinel. The night air, even within the roundhouse, has a way of sharpening the senses, and the need for a final draught of water is a quiet, physical requirement. The jar is cool to the touch, its clay body having absorbed the deep, grounding temperature of the earth floor. As the horn ladle is dipped into the water, the sound is a sudden, crystalline plink gurgle that shatters the silence for a fleeting moment. The water is perfectly clear, having settled throughout the day until every microscopic particle of the spring silt has found its way to the bottom. To drink this water is to taste the mountain. It is cold, so cold that it leaves a faint, tingling numbness on the tongue and a trail of icy freshness down the throat. It is the perfect counterpoint to the dry, radiating heat of the hearth. The horn of the ladle feels smooth and neutral against the lips, a natural material that carries no flavor of its own, allowing the pure mineral essence of the spring to shine through. After the drink, the ladle is returned to its hook, the final droplets of water falling back into the jar with a series of tiny, rhythmic taps that fade into the silence of the room. The preparation of the sleeping area is the final, most luxurious task of the day. The low benches around the hearth are layered with an abundance of soft, insulating materials. First, there are the rushes, thousands of dried, hollow stalks that have been spread thick upon the earth. They provide a springy, cushioned base that traps the air, acting as a barrier against the cool floor. Beneath the weight of the body, the rushes give way with a soft, dry crackle crunch, a sound that is as much a part of the winter night as the wind in the trees. The scent they release is grassy and sweet, a ghost of the summer wetlands that lingers in the dry heat of the room. Over the rushes, the sheepskins are spread. These are the heavy wools, fleeces that were taken from the oldest rams of the flock, their wool long, curly, and saturated with lanolin. To run a hand over the wool is to feel a landscape of softness, a tactile forest of fibers that are designed by nature to trap and hold the heat of the body. The wool feels slightly greasy to the touch, a sign of its high quality and its ability to repel the damp. It smells of the earth, the rain, and the animals themselves, a deep, comforting aroma that speaks of protection and survival. The blankets are the final layer. These are massive, heavy rectangles of hand-spun and hand-woven wool, dyed in the deep, earthy tones of the landscape, madder red, woad blue, and the yellow of weld. The weave is tight and dense, the result of weeks of labor at the upright loom. To lift such a blanket is to feel a significant weight, a physical pressure that is incredibly grounding. As the blanket is settled over the sheepskins, it makes a soft, muffled whump sound, the air being squeezed out from between the layers of wool. The edges of the blanket are finished with a simple, decorative fringe, the threads of which click softly against one another as the fabric is adjusted. The act of lying down is a slow and deliberate surrender to the night. The body sinks into the layers of wool and rushes, the various textures molding themselves to the contours of the limbs. The warmth of the banked fire, which has been absorbed by the stones and the floor throughout the day, rises up through the bedding, creating a radiant environment that is neither too hot nor too cold. It is a state of thermal equilibrium, a perfect balance that encourages the muscles to let go of their last remaining tensions. The head rests upon a small, firm pillow stuffed with dried meadowsweet and hops, herbs known for their ability to induce a deep and dreamless slumber. The scent is floral and slightly bitter, a soothing aroma that blankets the mind. From this low vantage point, the roundhouse appears as a vast, dark cathedral of domesticity. The rafters of the roof are lost in the deep shadows, but their presence is felt in the solidity of the structure. The occasional distant thud of snow falling from the thatch is a reminder of the world outside, but here, within the circle of the walls, that world is an abstraction. The silence is absolute, yet it is a thick silence, a silence that is filled with the presence of the objects in the room. The wooden bowls, the iron cauldron, the ceramic jars, the leather boots, they all sit in their places, silent witnesses to the passage of the night. The mind, now on the threshold of sleep, drifts back to the porridge. The memory of the slow-boiled oats, the way the bubbles rose and burst, the way the honey swirled in golden ribbons, the way the steam carried the scent of the harvest, becomes a hypnotic loop of imagery. The circular movement of the stirring spoon is mirrored in the circular walls of the house and the circular path of the sun. It is a world of loops and cycles, a world where nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed by the fire and the seasons. The boring history of the day, the grinding, the boiling, the eating, the cleaning is revealed as a sacred rhythm, a series of small, manageable acts that weave together to form the fabric of a life. The shadows on the wall, cast by the single, tiny ember that remains visible through the ash, move with a slow and rhythmic grace. They stretch and shrink, dance and fade, a silent performance of light and dark that lulls the eyes toward closure. The air in the roundhouse is cool against the face, but the body beneath the heavy wool blankets is a private hearth of warmth. This contrast is the ultimate luxury of the winter, to be cold enough to appreciate the heat, and to be safe enough to appreciate the silence. Outside, the stars have likely come out, piercing the frozen sky with their cold, distant light. The frost is growing on the stones of the valley, and the ice is thickening on the still waters of the marshes. The trees stand like skeletal sentinels, their sap deep in their roots, waiting for the return of the sun. But the roundhouse is a pocket of defiance, a small, warm bubble of humanity in the heart of the wilderness. The banked fire smolders, the wool blankets hold, and the silence of the night remains unbroken. The heartbeat slows to a steady, peaceful thrum that matches the pulse of the hidden embers. The breath becomes deep and rhythmic, a soft and regular sound that is the only indicator of life in the stillness of the room. Every detail of the day, the texture of the grain, the weight of the iron, the scent of the wood smoke, has been processed and filed away, leaving the mind clear and still. There is no worry for the morrow will bring the same familiar tasks, the same slow fire, and the same nourishing porridge. As the final traces of consciousness begin to fade, the room seems to expand, the walls dissolving into the vastness of the winter night. Yet the center remains. The hearth, even in its banked and quiet state, is the anchor that holds the spirit to the earth. The memory of the boiling porridge, the soft blup-blup of the oats, is the last sound the mind hears, a domestic lullaby that carries the soul across the threshold of sleep. The ancient British night is long, and the snow is deep, but the house is warm, the belly is full, and the peace is absolute. The darkness is not a void, but a presence, a soft, velvety enclosure that protects and nurtures. It is the darkness of the womb, the darkness of the seed in the earth, the darkness of the mind at rest. Within this darkness, the roundhouse is a masterpiece of quiet endurance. The fire will live until the dawn, protected by its mantle of ash. The water will remain cool in its jar. The wool will remain warm in its weave. Everything is as it should be, and everything is at peace in the heart of the frozen hills. The final hour of the day has transitioned into the deep, infinite expanse of the midwinter night. Inside the roundhouse, the atmosphere has achieved a state of absolute crystalline stillness. The air is no longer moving. It is a heavy, warm liquid that fills every corner of the circular dwelling, carrying the faint, ghostly remnants of the morning's boiled oats and the afternoon's wood smoke. The world outside the walls, the frozen hills of Britain, the silent forests, the rivers locked in their icy carapaces, has been completely erased by the darkness. There is only this room, this hearth, and this moment. The logistics of the night are settled, the fire is banked, and the body is cocooned within the ancient, scratchy warmth of the wool. To look at the room now is to see a study in the absence of light. The amber glow of the earlier evening has retreated into a subterranean red, a deep and pulsing crimson that exists only in the heart of the ash mound. Occasionally, a single, microscopic grain of charcoal will shift within the banked fire, releasing a tiny, silent spark that illuminates the gray surface of the ash for a fraction of a second before vanishing. This is the only movement in the room, a slow geological pulse that marks the passage of time without the need for a clock. The stones of the hearth, which have been saturated with heat for over 12 hours, are now the primary source of warmth. They radiate a steady, invisible energy that travels through the floor and into the bedding, a grounding heat that feels as though it comes from the very center of the earth. The smell of the room has reached its final, most comforting evolution. The sharp, resinous scent of the fresh firewood has faded, replaced by the mellow, earthy aroma of the white ash. Beneath this lies the sweet, floral ghost of the meadowsweet and hops from the pillow, and the deep, nourishing scent of the lanolin in the sheepskins. But the most persistent note is the smell of the porridge, a nutty, creamy fragrance that has seeped into the very timber of the rafters. It is a smell that represents safety. It is the scent of a survival strategy that has worked, a reminder that the grain was harvested, the stone was turned, and the fire was tended. It is a sensory blanket that lulls the mind into a state of total security. Every object in the roundhouse is now at rest. The iron cauldron, overturned near the hearth, is a dark and silent dome, its surface having finally cooled to the ambient temperature of the room. It sits upon the earth with a heavy, immovable presence, a silent guardian of the kitchen. The wooden bowls on the oak bench have absorbed the linseed oil, their grain now dark and lustrous, protected against the winter's dry breath. The applewood spoons lie beside them, their pale handles catching the last, faint glimmer of the embers. These tools are no longer mere objects of utility. They are the artifacts of a successful day, resting in the same profound silence as the people they serve. The texture of the bedding is a tactile symphony of the winter life. Beneath the body, the rushes provide a springy, hollow-core insulation that creaks with a soft, dry rhythm whenever the weight is shifted. Crackle hush, crackle hush. It is a sound like the forest floor in autumn, a dry and organic vibration. Above this, the sheepskins are a forest of soft, curly fibers that trap the air, creating a microclimate of intense, personal warmth. The wool is long and dense, its tips slightly coarse against the skin, but its core is a cloud of weightless heat. The indigo-dyed blankets, with their heavy, hand-spun weave, provide a comforting pressure, a weighted sleep that signals the nervous system to descend into the deepest levels of rest. The silence of the roundhouse is not a hollow void, but a thick and textured silence. It is composed of many microscopic sounds that, when woven together, create a tapestry of peace. There is the soft, rhythmic breathing of the inhabitants, a steady, tidal sound that fills the room with a sense of living presence. There is the occasional, dry rustle of the thatch as it settles under the weight of the snow. There is the distant, muffled whump of a snowdrift sliding from a nearby branch. And if one listens with extreme focus, there is the silent, falling weight of the snowflakes hitting the exterior of the walls. A sound that is more a sensation than a noise, a pressure of white velvet against the lime-washed clay. Outside the threshold, the British landscape is a vast, unmoving sea of white and indigo. The trees, the oaks, the ashes, the hawthorns, stand in a state of suspended animation, their life processes slowed to the speed of the stones. The frost is thick on their bark, a lace of frozen water that glitters under the cold light of the stars. The rivers are silent, their voices stifled by the ice, their currents moving like dark, slow-moving oil beneath the frozen surface. The entire world is in a state of boring endurance, a slow-motion struggle for survival that is defined by the absence of movement. But inside the roundhouse, that struggle has been won for another day. The circle is closed. The mind, floating on the edge of the dream state, returns one last time to the image of the boiling porridge. It sees the iron pot hanging over the slow fire. It sees the steam rising in its lazy, hypnotic spiral. It sees the wooden spoon moving in its eternal circle, round and round and round. The rhythm of the stirring has become the rhythm of the heart. The heat of the fire has become the heat of the blood. The grain of the earth has become the strength of the bone. There is no distinction between the meal, the house, the fire, and the person. All are part of the same slow-moving cycle of the midwinter. The boring nature of this history is its greatest gift. There is no drama here to startle the spirit. There is no conflict to tighten the muscles. There is only the repetition of the mundane, the beauty of the predictable, and the sanctity of the slow. The boiling of the porridge was not an event, it was a meditation. The cleaning of the bowl was not a chore, it was a ritual. The banking of the fire was not a task, it was a prayer for the morning. In this ancient world, the quality of one's life is measured by the quality of these small, repetitive actions. The darkness in the roundhouse is now absolute. The final ember has been covered by the shifting ash, and the room has surrendered to the velvety blackness of the night. Yet the warmth remains. It is a physical presence, a thick and comforting medium that supports the body and blankets the mind. The sense of space has vanished. There is no up or down, no wall or floor, only the sensation of being held in a vast, warm cradle. The scent of the oats and the meadowsweet is the only remaining guide, a fragrant thread that connects the sleeper to the reality of the home. The heartbeat has slowed to its most fundamental pace, a deep, resonant thrum that echoes the pulse of the earth. The breath is a slow and shallow sigh, moving in and out with the effortless grace of the tide. The mind has ceased its wandering, the thoughts having dissolved into a series of soft, abstract images. The curve of a wooden bowl, the glow of a red coal, the fall of a single snowflake. These images repeat in a slow, fading loop, becoming smaller and fainter with every breath, until they are nothing more than a whisper of a memory. The history of the porridge is finished. The grain has been ground, the water has been boiled, the honey has been stirred, and the meal has been savored. The fire has been tended, the tools have been oiled, and the house has been secured. There is nothing left to do. There is no past to regret and no future to fear. There is only the present moment of absolute, undisturbed rest. The ancient British night will continue for many hours. The snow will continue to fall, and the frost will continue to grow. But inside the circle of the roundhouse, the peace is perfect. The heaviness of the limbs is now total. The body feels as though it has become a part of the earth, a solid and unmoving element of the landscape. The warmth of the wool is a second skin, a protective barrier that ensures the spirit can wander far into the realms of sleep without ever losing its connection to the hearth. The smell of the wood smoke is a final, lingering blessing, a scent that promises that when the eyes eventually open, the fire will still be there, waiting to be woken from its bed of ash. As the last thread of consciousness snaps, the world of the roundhouse disappears, replaced by the vast and silent territory of the dream. But even there, the rhythm of the slow fire continues. The blup-blup of the porridge, the scritch-scritch of the spoon, the hush-hush of the broom. These sounds form the background of the winter dream, a domestic symphony that plays on a loop in the heart of the darkness. The ancient world is asleep, tucked away beneath the thatch and the snow, waiting for the return of the sun, safe in the knowledge that the cycle will begin again. The room is silent, the hearth is still, the house is warm. The end.